Carlos, welcome. And Luis, it's great to have you. Just wanted to do a very short introduction and to thank you for being with us. The one thing that I have to say is that if we had to select the two key individuals talking about the subject of climate smart would be the person that is leading the efforts in California and the person that is leading the efforts in Puerto Rico. So thank you for being with us, for being a strong partner, and go right ahead.
Thank you, Nolo. It humbles at least me to hear that. I don't consider myself an expert or anything, but we work hard and we try we try our best to address the situations in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and USVI, and hopefully we can give you a glimpse of that. I'm gonna start with my introduction, and I'll pass it to Carlos, and then Carlos can start on his topics. My name is Luis Cruz. I'm the director for USDA NRCS in the Caribbean, which covers both Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. And again, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and hopefully we can address some issues. Carlos.
Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. From very early here in California, still the sun's coming through the horizon here. My name is Carlos Suarez. I am the state conservationist. Translate as Luis said, as state director for NRCS in California. I'm super happy to be here. And as Luis indicated, very humble to be speaking to all of you today with my colleague and my friend, Luis, about some of the topics, some of the things that we are doing in our respective states, but also as an agency. So I'm going to start. And, so since the focus is on climate smart practices, climate smart programs, and what basically climate smart as a whole, what our agency is doing or has been engaged in climate smart and building resiliency to climate changes in our nation, in our case in California, in Puerto Rico. And before I go on, Nolo and Maya, thank you so much for inviting us to speak and to the audience to be listening today. So let me just start with the frame. Many of you, and I'm going to be very quick on kind of the history of NRCS. When we talk about climate smart and when we talk about resiliency, NRCS and maybe we're going to sound biased, but NRCS was way ahead on the curve on what we have been doing. We have been working on protecting the natural resources of our great nation for over 87 years. And we work on protection of working hand in hand on a voluntary basis with farmers, with ranchers, with forest owners, and forest stewards in the protection of the natural resources, whereas it might be, whether it's water conservation, improving water quality, improving the air quality, which is a huge program here in California. Also, increasing and protecting the wildlife habitat, which is so important. And sometimes it goes, people tend to, not people, but sometimes it tends to be not going hand in hand with our efforts and key efforts that we're doing. Soil quality, soil health, soil erosion, protection of the soil, but also looking at the animals, looking at how all that figures into all those resources come together as part of the great landscapes that we protect. So just as I give you that background, that's what we have been doing. And we are scientists. That's one of the things that, although we are in leadership positions, Luis and I are, one of the things that I know that Luis will talk about his background, but we are very proud of being scientists. Mm-hmm. Being scientists that are leading our efforts, we're leading with technical assistance, and that's the focus first that we put in our programs, providing technical assistance first, and then utilizing all the resources, financial assistance that many programs bring. The Farm Bill that has been renewed every 5 years. Also, now with the bipartisan infrastructure law, and also with the Inflation Reduction Act. And in addition, with the administration and the works that they're doing with the climate smart commodities grants, also equity and inclusion grants that have been providing to farmers and ranchers that have been historically underserved. We will utilize all those tools at the federal level, but then we also use the tools at the state level in partnership, because all the work that we do in partnership is critical to do this. So transitioning, going into the subject immediately. How are we putting in climate smart? How is this affecting it? How our programs or how our technical assistance is utilized to address climate smart? So let me just story about California. You have heard California. We have been under droughts. We are in the second drought in my history here. I have been state conservationist for the state almost 10 years now. And when I arrived from Florida, interestingly enough, and we all went through, as you know, what happened in Florida just recently with Ian, or Hurricane Ian, we were coming in, and I was coming into the onset of the 2013 drought that the state was under, which many allude that is not a separate event, but rather part of a mega drought that have been occurring in the west part of the state of the nation. And what we were looking at is how can we, the conversation, the discussion that we were talking, everyone, the partners and everyone was talking, it was, okay, how do we, how do we address the drought? How can we be, how can we get more water? How can we do some things? Let me give you some background. That things that were happening. First, California used to have a forestry fire season or forest fire season, wildfire season. That's no longer the case. Wildfire season is pretty much year round in our state. Water and availability. We have the state program and the federal program that provides water from the northern part of the state down to Southern California, and also along the way, it provides water to all the farmers and ranchers and forest users. That water was started to be curtailed, and the allocations of the water, because the water became less and less and less as we have less precipitation. Also, as we look into how we were, how is that affecting the growth of our crops, the growth of the produce here in the state, which is the #1 state in the nation when in agriculture. And I always tend to brag a little bit about this. If California was a separate nation, we would be the fifth largest economy in the world. How is that affecting this economy that had an impact on the whole state and the whole nation? How can we utilize our programs to address that? So we start changing the conversation. I told my staff and I said, we are addressing this. We're looking at the problem and we need to start thinking solution. When we're thinking solution, we are being forward thinking. We have, and so I said, how do we build, rather than saying, how do we address drought? We need to say, how do we build resiliency to climate change and utilize those conservation practices to make that happen? As in California, we have done I'm very proud of the men and women in the state and our partnership, where we're working towards protecting the forest, increasing wildfire protection to wildfires. Also, we have leading the effort in utilizing groundwater recharge practice, which is a practice that's not readily available to all the states, NRCS states in the nation. We are leading that effort because one of the challenges that the state was facing is groundwater, the depletion of groundwater. So we start working with partners who have already done practices on the ground under the Conservation Innovative Grants, which is a part of NRCS programs. We took those the results of those practices, those trials, and we started incorporating that as part of our array of conservation practices, our toolbox, as we call it. But also improving soil health, making sure that we utilize practices that sustain and keep water and keep humidity on the ground, so that we reduce the use of water. And as we talk about water, it's improving irrigation system. California is heavily irrigated land agriculture in the state, especially in the San Joaquin Valley, which is, they call it, the bread and salad bowl of the nation. How do we improve the irrigation system so that there's less water used, yet still enough water to produce crops at the similar rates that have been produced before? So we work with our partners, we work with our farmers and ranchers in implementing practices that would change from flood irrigation to, in some cases, continue flood irrigations, but actually making it more efficient, where we reduce the waste of water by 33% in many cases, but also transition into drip irrigation, micro sprinklers, et cetera. And basically integrating other practices, other landscapes into the equation, protection of the, as I said, wildlife habitat, so that we continue building that resiliency. So that's, the last 25 years have been critical in that discussion. How can we do this more? We are going to continue experiences these changes, and as such, we have to temper our response with practices, and also in some cases conservation practices that may not have been created yet, or partners already have been testing it as pilots. We need to continue incorporating that as part of our array of tools that we offer to protect the resources. So I'm going to stop here because I want to definitely give a time to my colleague and my friend here, to Luis, to speak, and especially with the situations that have happened in Puerto Rico. And he and I have, we're both Puerto Ricans, but we also both work in Puerto Rico during Hurricane Maria. Maria is an example, and I'm just going to say briefly this, is an example of how climate change is affecting our nation. Nobody saw what was coming with Maria. Maria caused, has been the worst hurricane and probably worst disaster, natural disaster that our beautiful island has suffered. But what it put at the face of everyone was the challenges and the issues that not being prepared or not having climate smart resiliency in an island could cause to the food security, which is a national security issue for not only for our island, for the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico, but also the impact that that has overall in the nation. So I'm sure that we will have some questions, but I wanted to transition and let Luis speak about Puerto Rico, but also what he's been doing as well. So Luis, floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Carlos. So as far as Puerto Rico, I think Carlos left me in a perfect segue. He was talking about Hurricane Maria, and this is happening all through the nation, but in the Caribbean and places where you can get this type of things, Florida, southern U.S., even some parts of Latin America, we see it more, right? We see, if you go to your state's data, you're gonna see those weather patterns, right? You get rainy season, dry season, and rainy again. That is changing drastically, and what we're seeing is high precipitation areas and deep droughts during parts of the year, where yes, we had those patterns. Now those patterns are extreme patterns of drought and extreme patterns of heavy rains and floods. And I'll give you, Carlos talked about Maria, which is a great example of a huge storm event, a huge dam, and not being prepared. The infrastructure was delicate. But as I've been a director, what we're seeing more is weird weather events. You know, we had a rain event in February that dumped 16 inches in 12 hours. in a couple municipalities, just because there was a warm weather front and a cold weather front coming from the U.S. that got combined. We had never seen those type of things, and we are getting stronger hurricanes and stronger storms closer together in more closer patterns time wise. Here recently, we got hit by Hurricane Fiona here in the Caribbean, and winds did some damage in the west part of the island. But as any island, especially when we have the abrupt changes, just to give you a perspective, we go from 0 above sea level to 4,000 above sea level in a very small island. We're about 100 miles uh, long ways and 30 miles wide approximately. There's different changes in there. So flooding events are a huge issue. And I'll give you the example. For Fiona, there are sections of the island that got 31 inches of rain in 36 hours. So to give you a perspective, uh, when you go to the rainiest cities, I used to work in Alabama for a long time. The rainiest city in the U.S. Is Mobile, Alabama, 67 inches of rain a year. So imagine getting almost half of that allocation of water in 36 hours. And that's what we're playing here in the Caribbean. We have to be ready for those events, and we have to be ready for the drought that we're getting through the summer. So I'm gonna divide our programs in different topics. I think Carlos explained it very well that we are an applied sciences agencies. We take all the science that's available, and with our scientific knowledge, we apply it in the field. And I love that about our agencies, because we can get a lot of things done. But we're relying on a lot of partners to get a lot of that data, and all of our partners are critical, from other USDA agencies like the Forest Service, FSA, um, different universities, the University of Puerto Rico, Inter-American University, among others. I'm not going to mention all of them. But with them, we're trying to get assistance on different patterns and recognition of how that climate is changing, so we can start getting into risk analysis. I think Carlos explained it well, where we go to a farm, we address resource concerns, and we have traditionally, the agencies has also done area-wide projects or landscape projects, right? Where we're trying to impact a larger set of a watershed. However, it is different, and I think Carlos touched on it. The water management portion uh, is not enough anymore to manage water at your farm. That is a new reality. You have to manage water at a community level, at a landscape level. All the stakeholders needs to be together, trying to make decisions on how the aquifers are changing. We see that in the aquifers in the south here. How do you capture water on that landscape? Making sure that you're collecting as much as possible, and how you minimize losses. So that will enter into my first piece of the puzzle, infrastructure. So we have a lot of water infrastructure in the island that's from the 1920s. A lot of that infrastructure did their job, but it's now time to correct it, to minimize all the water losses that we may have from evapotranspiration, or pipes that are broken or not a seal. And we're working, for example, with the Puerto Rico Energy Authority. They manage all the irrigation channels in the island, and we're working with them to kind of modernize the irrigation channel in Isabela, which serves water for 5 municipalities that are being impacted, and 100% of the farmers get fed by this particular system. So by addressing that infrastructure, we're ensuring that the water gets to where it needs to go. So that's the first piece of the puzzle, making sure that the infrastructure is safe and it goes according to the changes that we're going to see in the future. If we minimize losses, we are minimizing risk into the future. Okay, that's the way that we're seeing it. Same thing with flooding. We're trying to do more water and sediment basins that can capture water and make it go, or in certain places ensure that the drainage are clean the way they used to be, especially specifically in farming areas. I can tell you in the area of Yabucoa, which is southeast Puerto Rico. We're working with the eastern conservation districts on restoring the historic sugarcane drainage channels, and that's going to allow them to farm the area as it was intended, and allow for that water to move as it was designed. The other piece of the puzzle, once we do the infrastructure, we work as a community to manage the water and those resources. The other piece is soil health. Soil health in the Caribbean is mighty important. I think Carlos mentioned about how to mitigate against risk, how to be resilient, how to make farms resilient. Probably soil health is the biggest investment that we can make, other than the infrastructure that I just talked about. At the farm level, that soil health, if you increase organic matter, let's say by 1%, estimate says that that's 25,000 gallons that you can store in 1 acre of soil, on a 1 acre of land. So imagine having that reservoir primed to collect 25,000. So it doesn't matter if it's a hurricane or if there's a drought, you're trying to make that soil resilience. In Puerto Rico, that has proven a little bit challenging, and probably in all tropical areas, because soil weathers at all times. There's no cold patterns to prevent that weathering, and there's a lot of rain. So making sure that we are aggressive in soil health practices like no-till, expanding diversity and planting cover crops, among other things, has to be critical. In the mountain area, we have done it with, we're doing several tests with conservation covers, like peanuts around coffee. So you get a early cover while the coffee is growing, you get some nitrogen in there. And when the coffee is ready and covering the shade, then that coffee, the whole system is kind of protected with good organic matter to recover into time. And we're trying to do that with different crops. The other piece of that with soil health, and maybe with water management, I mentioned that we are a very steep island, so we're trying to incorporate more agroforestry practices into our battery of practices. And we have always incorporated trees into our systems in all states, but the agroforestry will allow us to incorporate traditional practices and traditional crops into the conservation practices that we are recommending. We are working with one of our partners, Enviro Survey, and a company called Agroforestry X. They're trying to create a database with all the tropical trees, native and production trees. And once it's input into the system, it helps you design a system in your land where you can see how all the trees will be planted to mitigate erosion, be productive, among other things. So we're very excited about that project, and we're hoping to get that out soon. And with that, I think we are close to our time. I'm gonna wrap it up with water recharge. I think Carlos touched on this, but I think it's understated nationwide of the importance of wetland creation, wetland protection, recharging aquifers through different practices. Those systems are critical for the water that we all use as far as groundwater. And here in the Caribbean, we're looking for ways to kind of attack that. So I'm going to be calling Carlos about this water recharge practices in California, because that's a critical piece of the puzzle. So with that, I see Adrian on the screen.
Hey, Luis, how are you doing? Good to see you, Carlos.
Good to see you.
I know something about wetlands. I'm down in Louisiana, and
Mhm.
we need as much water recharge as possible,
Yep.
as long as it doesn't flood. So we've got a couple questions from the participants. The first one comes from a farmer. He says, my farm is small but productive. How will I be able to participate in climate smart programs? In what ways can I get involved?
So yeah, Adrian, thank you. And that's an excellent question, and something that as I was discussing this, as we both were discussing, I wrote down the importance of our programs being not just for one size of the puzzle, it's for everyone. Not only it's for everyone, but for all sizes. When climate changes occur and are occurring for quite some time, especially we have seen the increase in the variabilities in the last 25, 30 years, but especially the last 10. Who get affected the most? Our small farmers, because they don't have necessarily the tools in place, the practices in place to address that, to address those changes, or the as Luis explained very well, the infrastructure in place that say another like a meat to bigger farm operation or in some cases farming corporations have. So our programs have been targeted to work with the historically underserved, with small producers, and we receive under in the environmental quality, as an example, environmental quality incentive program is our flagship program, and not only California, but I know Edwin, Luis has been, that EQA has been his flagship program. That program is the one that provides financial assistance to farmers, ranchers, to forest owners, and protect the natural resources by implementing conservation practices. In California alone, 47% of the funding that has been dedicated to that we utilize under EQIP has been targeted or has been utilized by historically underserved small producers. To the question, so the funding is there. You just have to show up in the office, call your conservationists. We have field offices throughout the nation. We have over 3,000 field offices in the nation. Here in California, we have 58 counties. Some counties are the size of a state, but we have protection. We have the staff in place. Same thing with Puerto Rico. They have and I'll let Luis explain about his structure, but we have the individuals. And one of the things that we have been doing here in the state, we're the most, we're very proud to say that we're the most diverse state in crops. We have over 400 crops that are produced. But one thing that we are very proud of, we're the most diverse state when it comes to people. We have Latinos, Latinas, African Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, women farmers that number continue to increase substantially, people with disabilities, etc. And we are doing a staff in our offices to serve that clientele. I have offices where we have personnel that speak Chinese, that speak Korean. We have, I would say, half of our offices, we have at least one staff that speaks Spanish. We have a staff that speak, that address Hmong population, the Punjabi population, and so on and so forth. But we also working with other groups and organizations that are coming in, like veterans, our men and women of the armed forces that are transitioning from serving and protecting our nation, transitioning into farming. And also an increase, and super proud of this, of LGBTQ brothers and sisters that are getting into farming, that are in many cases, there are a lot of them that actually were working in science and technology and the big internet companies and so forth. And they understand the importance of farming, and they understand the importance of farming to our nation. So just, you need to contact your local office. We are ready to serve you.
This is from another participant that wants to know which conservation practices specially support agroforestry techniques.
Luis, I'll let's start, but I can go into more detail, but I definitely want Luis have expertise as well. Luis, go ahead.
Yep. So Adrian, I'm gonna try to address your first question and the same question at the same time. So for Puerto Rico and USVI, small farms are our bread and butter. We help, we assist small farmers all the time, and just think about the things that we talk about, applied sciences, and we can help you understand how much water you're getting, how much water do you need, what's your water budget, how do you save more water, how do you use it efficiently, that being for cattle or for plants, and then if you need additional practice to mitigate soil erosion and tree planting, we can do that. So moving that into agroforestry, it translates into the same thing. We have about 30 practices that involve tree planting, and all those practices we can incorporate into an agroforestry system. That being silvopasture, for example. So we have a practice where we can incorporate trees into pasture areas to address shade, and in some cases address feeding. If you have another system that you can add bushes, you can get something like a protein bank with legume trees. So there's many ways to incorporate agroforestry, hedgerows. You can do in Puerto Rico, we use shaded coffee practice where we plant native trees to kind of protect the coffee from the sun. That addresses not only the quality of the coffee, but also addresses erosion and other things. It also, you got to remember, trees have deeper roots, so it helps in that water cycle in all those areas. So as far as agroforestry, even if we don't call it the same way that you do it, just explain your idea, and there's probably a way that we can make it happen. If there's science behind it, we can get it done.
I like that. I like that. If there's science behind it, we can get it done. That's a good
Yeah.
motto. Well, thank you all both. I think that is the end of the Q&A. And we will be transitioning to the farmers panel next. So thank you both for coming.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. Have a great day.
Appreciate it.